Hello, everybody, and welcome to Litera Book Festival, together with our guest, Emily Gunnis. Hello.
Hi.
I'm your host, Monica Grecu is my name. I'm coordinating editor at the Litera Publishing House, the proud publisher of Emily Gunnis's books, The Girl in the Letter, The Lost Child, and The Midwife's Secret. These are 3 books that we've published. Thank you so much, Emily, on behalf of our readers in Romania for accepting this invitation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So let's start with a bit of personal and professional history.
Yeah.
You are the daughter of best-selling author Penny Vincenzi,
Yes.
one of 4 daughters.
Mhm.
So how much did your mother's career influence you growing up and also your literary journey?
I'd say hugely. She was a massive inspiration, and we used to talk about plots and stories and characters a lot. We used to go, whenever she got stuck, we'd go on a long walk together and thrash it out together. And I learned a lot from her about not just stories and writing and characters and plot, but about not kind of keeping at it and working. Her work ethic was just incredible. She had the most amazing energy, which I don't have. But I think I've inherited a little bit of her determination. She was just incredibly hardworking and a great, people would tell her if, she believed she was incredibly lucky, but she also believed that, you can make your luck, and luck is a lot about hard work and tenacity. But she was a real trailblazer as well in her time when she was born, and particularly when she got married. Women didn't really work, so my father kind of even letting her work at the time when she was a journalist, and she had to work, long hours, and there was no such thing as maternity leave and nurseries, and she was a real trailblazer. So she was very inspiring. She made me kind of always think, why not just try, give it a go, you never know. She was very inspiring.
You said in an interview at some point that your mom made success look easy.
Yeah.
So you did have great success yourself, starting with your debut novel in 2019, nearly 500,000 copies sold worldwide, and it was translated in 17 languages.
Yeah.
So how do you define success in writing for you? And also, what is success in life, in your personal, in your professional life? How do you see success?
Okay, it's quite a big question. I really think it's how happy you are. And I know that's such a cliche, but, I had this desperation to be published. I was just desperate to kind of prove it to myself and to prove it to everyone that I could do this thing and write a book. And I did it, and it was amazing. It was a #2 in Kindle, and it was all over the world, and it was just so exciting. But it was also this huge kind of shock, in that it didn't make me feel the way I thought it would make me feel. I was elated, and I was in shock, and it was so exciting. But it was a bit of a wake-up call, in that it's all about balance. And you can obsess about something so much that it can take over everything. And really, you become the best writer when you relax a little bit, I think, and take it all in, and just sort of constantly making notes. And if you're not living your life and doing interesting things and learning, then you're not going to be writing very interesting books. If you're just obsessing about one thing all the time, and it's just it's about being grateful and just keeping at it. I think being successful is enjoying. How many people can say they love what they do? It's just so rare, and I'm incredibly lucky to say that I love what I do. And it's also just being prepared to just work hard and accept that it's hard and it's painful, but you've got to just get on with it. And just get on with it, and then put that aside and switch off and enjoy your family and your life, and do other things and enjoy other things as well. But I've had a lot of help I think, so much help, so much support from my sisters, who are very like my mum, and my husband and my family. I just feel incredibly lucky. I think a lot of it's down to luck as well. I've got lovely publishers and, my lovely editor. So I think a lot of success is luck and genes and sticking at it.
It's an interesting combination what you're describing. Actually.
Yes.
And it kind of I think it also sets the bar to something achievable. So it's not really, you cannot set your own expectations too high, because then you're disappointed and no longer have the energy to continue.
Definitely, yeah, completely. And I think also, if you're obsessing too much about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, I've got to get into the top 10, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, then you're just always comparing yourself to others rather than thinking, this is great, I'm being paid to do what I love, I'm so lucky, and just enjoy it. And as long as you can, to be paid to do that, just enjoy that. It doesn't matter, just write the best books you can and enjoy the rest of it and work as hard as you can. But, essentially enjoy it, because otherwise you're just beating yourself up, trying to compare yourself to others, and it just doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah. So, because we were talking about comparing yourself to others, but not in this sense. Which authors or books were your inspiration, let's say, or an influence? Maybe also growing up or in your childhood, if you can.
Sure. Roald Dahl was the first book that really hooked me. Boy, I remember sitting in assembly in Mr. Thomas when I was about 11, or maybe probably younger than that. Actually, it was junior school, so it must be more like 8 or 9. Just reading a chapter of Boy every week, and I was just gripped. I'd never been gripped like that before. So then I read all of Roald Dahl's books. And then I read Jilly Cooper, which was a huge eye-opener. I found it in my mum's study and I stole it away and read Riders. And it was just so exciting. And she's just the most brilliant writer. I just love her. And then I got quite into reading a lot of non-fiction. I started reading a lot of screenplays. I first started out wanting to be a screenwriter. I don't read very fast. I'm a very slow reader. I always get intimidated on Twitter when writers just seem to devour books. They just seem to read a book every 2 days. And I'm actually a really slow reader. And a lot of my books are based on factual, events. So I read a lot of non-fiction. I read a lot of kind of newspaper articles. I go down rabbit holes in reading history books and Hilary Mantel, and it just depends what mood I'm in, really. But probably the biggest influence on The Girl in the Letter was a writer called Zoe Heller, who wrote Notes on a Scandal, and also Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I've read both those books about 12 times, and I just love that they're in the first person, and they're just so slow and kind of cutting, and the observation in them, and they're just so honest and raw. I find writing when there's just loads of description, and I'm sure they've written very beautifully and have won a lot of awards, but I don't necessarily enjoy books like that because I can't really escape into them. Whereas books where I feel like it's someone writing them who's being really honest and who isn't a particularly nice person, I love all that. I love The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, that series. Anything a little bit dark and honest and kind of really slow, almost painfully slow,
It's interesting what you say about the slow pace of a book, because it allows you to digest both the information and the atmosphere and the feelings that they stir in you. And yes, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is, I think it was my first encounter with the Scandinavian noir. So
Yeah.
it's really, really amazing how hooked I was. And I am an avid reader, but it needs to be something really interesting, because somehow, you know, when you edit books for a living, you're also reading as your job, you know. So
yes,
everything
all
that you
day
read for pleasure needs to be very special.
Yeah, and I think that really inspired me in the sense that I really learned something from it, about the newspaper industry, and you know, about, well, there's so much in it, it's hard to you know, define it, but I just thought it definitely planted a seed in the sense of, I like books where you're learning something, where there's a historical element to it, where there's a lot of research. Books that are really self-indulgent and just go on and on and on in someone's kind of subconscious, I don't find myself so kind of gripped by. But if I'm thinking, oh my God, I didn't know that, that's really interesting, and I feel like the writer's done a lot of research and put a lot of work in, I love books like that. And that's when I started thinking about The Girl in the Letter, and how I could potentially write a story about mother and baby homes, which I'd always been fascinated in, but I could bring in some factual stuff as well. It didn't all have to be, you know, made up. And also some of it is so horrific that I loved the fact that some of it was true, because people couldn't say that would never happen, because it did. So it gives you some extra punch in your writing, I think.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the challenges of writing historical fiction is not to go too much into the historical detail, that you lose the actual life of the characters and what you were building, the world that you're building. So I think you've already started touching on this, but how do you get your inspiration for writing the books? And also, as an aside, how much do you value research, your own research for the books?
Well, research to me is the best part of my job, and chatting to people who are, you know, have had a life of living and learning the trade that you're trying to sum up in 100,000 words. I just love it. I love going out. I love, you know, meeting people, chatting to people. Quite often the person who you think is going to be brilliant turns out to be not so brilliant, and the person you think is going to be just a backup turns out to be absolutely amazing. Because quite often you can get someone who's quite senior, who almost has done it too much, too many interviews and spoken to too many people, and they're too polished. Whereas if you catch someone who's a little newer to it all, and you're just, I just remember talking to this midwife when I was writing The Lost Child, which is now The Missing Daughter, and I was just agog on the sofa with the story she was telling me. She was just all this stuff. I just couldn't believe that, you know, that she had been through all this. And there's no way that if I'd spoken to someone from the National Midwifery Society, they would have opened up to me the way that she did. And literally with a half-hour interview, I had my book. It was amazing. It was just the most euphoric feeling. You have to be a little bit careful with research. And it was a word of warning from my mum, which did help me with this. You can disappear down a rabbit hole and just spend so much time doing research that it becomes a form of procrastination, and you end up just not really writing anything. So she always said to me, research a bit, write a bit, research a bit, write a bit. And it's the best advice I've ever been given. It really works. And also you forget, if you're interviewing someone and then you do too much research, 2 weeks later, you've forgotten the impact of that interview. So you lose the buzz of that person talking to you. Whereas if you just write it down and then go off and do some research, write it down, it keeps it all fresh.
Mm-hmm. So how is your day how does a day in your life as a writer look like?
Not very impressive. My kids go, you know, I get my kids up, go off to school. My husband goes to work. I do all the domestic stuff, shopping, you know, there's so much going on during the day that I rarely write during the day. I'll often do research in the day or do interviews in the day and do a lot of thinking in the day. But it's not until I put the kids at bed at night that I do my writing, because that's when everything's quiet and I know I'm not going to get any text messages. So I write from 9:30 till 12:30 at night, and normally about 1,000 words, 2,000 words on a good day. And normally I'm just all day thinking about what I'm going to write that night. And that is from when I think I trained myself to do that from when I was working and writing at night. So I'd be work all day thinking about what I was going to write, you know, doing my research at lunchtime, and then I'd write at night and it would all come out. So I don't really write in the day.
Did the pandemic affect your writing patterns?
Yeah. It was pretty awful. In terms of just the kids were at home, and I just found it really hard to write. But at first, but then luckily my husband started working from home, so he did some of the homeschooling, and then gradually I got back into my routine. But when it first kicked off, I was just like, oh my God, I can't. You know, you need so much time as a writer just to think. If you've got little children running around and you never get any space from them, it's very hard to find that space for yourself in your head, as every mother knows, with every profession. I think it was very hard on women in particular, but, you know, hard on everyone. But I think working mums having to do both, it was definitely a tough time. But I wrote The Midwife's Secret in the lockdown, and I'm really proud of it. So I did it in the end, stuck at it, pushed on through.
Which of your novels do you think are candidates for the big screen? Are there any I don't know, talks in this respect? I know that you're also a screenwriter, so how are you going to what are your feelings, and which of your books would you say is the best candidate?
It's the holy grail for a writer, I think, to be on the big screen. But I'd love it. But to be honest, I don't. It seems so something that it's so hard. There's so many books out there, and there's so many films or TV shows that you know. There's only so many TV shows that get the green light. That I tend to think if it happened, it would be great. There was a flurry around The Girl in the Letter, just because it did so well. But I think because there were a few films out at the top, well, one in particular, Philomena, was out at the time of The Girl in the Letter. And I think often these things happen in a few, like, decades after a book's come out. My mum's we're just getting the options for my mum's book. You know, there's talks at the moment for one of my mum's books. So I think it's just the long game sometimes, and it would be amazing, but I don't really think about it, to be honest with you.
And if the story is somehow beyond time, then it can always happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when you least expect it.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Okay, now let's talk about the future a little bit, and your future projects. What are you working on? Can you tell us? What do you have in store for the readers?
So I'm just finishing, I think I'm going to be sending it off this week, book 4, which I just loved writing. Probably I've loved writing this more than any other book, because I feel that I'm finally getting into I've kind of worked how works for me, with so many of my books, I've had to write them and rewrite them and write them and rewrite them. And I mean, I've had to ditch 60, 70,000 words sometimes. Wow. And I mean, I've yet to hand it in. So Charisse might not agree with me, but I just feel like we've thrashed it out so much at the start this time that it's been much less stressful process. And I've also loved it because it centers around a police officer, a female police officer in the 1970s. And it follows her to the modern day. And the case of a girl who went missing in 1985 from a care home in Sussex. And it's a girl who's always played on her mind. And when she first started out in the police, she didn't have the power or the respect or the authority to do anything about it. The fact that this girl, at the inquest, it was decided that she'd killed herself, and she always felt that she hadn't. And 30 years later, her remains are found, and she's about to retire. And it's a race against time to work out what happened to this girl, and also reflect back on her career as a woman in the police force in the from 1970 to 2015. And the 1970s was when the Sex Discrimination Act came in. So before that, in the police force, there was a women's section and a men's section, and the women would get all the pink jobs and the men would get all the blue jobs. So the men got all the good stuff, crime, fraud, murders, all the good stuff, you know, I say. And the women got shoplifting, dealing with children, anything to do, you know, that were women's work. And then in 1975, the Sex Discrimination Act came in, and it just threw a firework into all of that because they weren't allowed to do that anymore. So she worked through that time and she saw all these incredible changes. But even in the modern day, in 2015, it's about a lot of my books are about how much things have changed for women, or have they, you know, ... question mark. That's the running theme, really, I'd say, probably through all of my books. And it's very much the case with this one. But it's much more like The Girl in the Letter, in that there's murders and there's, you know, it's a bit darker, back to the dark side. But I'm really excited about it. I've loved writing it.
It really sounds very exciting, and I'm looking forward to reading it. So now let's talk about what your advice would be to budding writers. You know, there's someone who's starting their career. They may not have such a you know, an important model in their life that they could follow. So how should they approach writing as a career?
I think as a writer, the best thing you can do is share your ideas, go on writing courses, talk to people. There's such a panic, I think, as a writer. You think, I've had a really good idea, but I'm scared to share it in case someone takes my idea. And I think that's such a dangerous mindset, because it's only when you talk about your ideas that you're testing them, you're thrashing them out. And also, if I'm talking to someone about an idea and I can see their eyes are wandering off a bit and they're nodding, but they're not really, you know, interested, there's no point me writing that book. If they're leaning in and their eyes are wide and they've got goosebumps, I know it's worth me investing my time in. The chances of that person who you've talked to about your idea taking your idea that you've thought of and writing it better than you, I believe, are a million to one. It's just not going to happen. For all the benefit of sharing your ideas, if you're a really good writer, it doesn't matter if occasionally something gets, you know, it's never happened to me, but if someone lifts something that an idea you've had and runs with it, you know, I just think it's so unlikely that it outweighs the benefit of sharing your ideas. And I got a lot of help from an literary agency called Cornerstones, and they helped me so much with kind of shaving back all my ramblings and doing a lot of show, not tell, I was describing way, way, way too much, you know, rather than kind of still now I hear the Ben at Cornerstones in my head saying, yes, but what does it smell like? What does this room look like? What does it feel like? What time is it? Who's outside? You know, is she hungry? Is she thirsty? You know, what's on her mind? You know, rather than saying she walked into the room, she sat down, you know, how did she walk into the room? Is she tired? You know, everything, just slow everything down. And then you immediately feel like, you know, you're there. So just practice, 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 share, and listen to advice, and keep at it. Don't give up.
Thank you so much for your advice. Now
for what it's worth.
Well, it's the advice of someone who has written books that have been appreciated all over the world. So it's a lot worth. But okay, now I think we're coming towards the end of our interview. So could you please tell a couple of words to the Romanian readers?
Of course. Thank you so much for publishing my books. And I really hope that you enjoy them and continue to enjoy them. And that you have a wonderful summer filled with lots of reading and swimming and friends and sunshine and nice food. Thank you.